camera earlier, so we're reconvening at 6:31. And we will return to open meeting at 6:31. Agenda approval, summer business meeting. We have Councillor Gordon, as presented. All in favor? Excellent. Okay, adoption of previous minutes, 4.1. So we have the July 15th summer minutes for adoption. Councillor Waring. Oh, Councillor Hamilton beat you to it. Councillor Hamilton for adoption. Anyone see anything they'd like to correct? Spelling's good. All in favor? Oh,
Mayor, could I back you up a little bit?
Sure.
We require a motion from council to go
Open the meeting.
return.
return to the open
Yeah,
meeting.
at 6:31.
Need a motion for that?
Nope.
We need a motion for that one now.
Oh, you wanted a motion to return? Sure.
I'll give you that one.
Councillor Waring will give us that one. All in favor on Councillor Waring? There you go. Pause for effect. Waring, pause for effect. Tell us when you're ready, Heather.
Agenda approval, the motion was made by,
Councillor Gordon,
as presented.
as presented. And that's carried unanimous. And 4.1, we have Councillor Hamilton for adoption of the summer business meeting, July 15th. That's also carried. Okay, resolutions from closed, we have none. And question period, at the beginning of every council meeting, we have 15 minutes for the public to ask questions of administration and council. Mr. Sharp, have we received any questions today? None, so seeing none, we will move on. 6.1 is good. Statutory hearings, we have none. 8 delegations, we have none. Reports, 9.1 Chief Administrative Officer's Report. Mr. Sharp, you have the comment.
Thank you, Mayor Crane. 2 items to update council on this week. The first one is on the cul-de-sac education and enforcement. You'll recall last month we had a direction from council to proceed with an enhanced community education around cul-de-sac, and then subsequently starting on January 1st that the enforcement would follow consistent with the bylaw. So I just wanted to give council an update on where things were at with that. Currently, staff are prepping and doing the analysis on different areas, properties, etc., that we may need to educate the community or the residents on. From September the 1st to October the 31st, we'll proceed with advance notification to the affected residents. So we will launch the education and awareness program. There will be a variety of mediums that will help us do that, so that affected residents in cul-de-sac are aware of the bylaw, aware of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and the reasons for that as well, the implications to operations and their neighbor. November and December, we'll start with a softer type of enforcement, so we'll continue to educate residents. We'll also put friendly reminders at different locations if we see any sort of a violation contrary or anything, behavior contrary to the bylaw. Continued public communications and let people know that the new year's coming. And in the new year, we will commence enforcement. So residents in the various areas that are affected should see something in the next couple of weeks around education. The second item that I wanted to update council on is regarding intermunicipal economic development. So I'm sure Councillor Waring or Councillor Gordon could also update the rest of us on the happenings there, but I just wanted to take a brief moment to pass on administrative update to council. Currently, we have had our first meeting in orientation for the Economic Development, Intermunicipal Economic Development Committee. That was on August the 8th. Leslie Miller was appointed as the chairperson. The consultants that we're working with have provided an overview of the project to the committee and the details of the research plan and upcoming business workshops, what the committee can expect. Currently, we have launched the communication and research phase. The online survey was posted as of August 14th. We had 79 responses from the community. There are 2 workshops planned, a number of interviews scheduled for this week, of which the first workshop is tonight in Black Diamond. So the remainder of the months of October, or August, September, and October will be different targeted workshops facilitated by the consultants, what we call deeper dive interviews to get to what we flesh out the heart of the issues in both of our communities and get quality feedback from various stakeholders. And then there will be a draft strategy presentation to council in October. From there, the remainder of the plan will be summarized and rolled out. I'd love to be able to answer any questions on either of those things from council. I may have to defer to our 2 council reps on the ACDEV, but I'm okay with that.
Perfect. Anyone have any questions? I have one, so. You're good. Just on the cul-de-sac education enforcement, in the education portion, will we also explain that if you would like basically the good neighbor policy that we were talking about, where you can ask to be exempt, will that be part of the education platform?
So I know to use your phrase, the good neighbor policy or the exemption request was one option that council had considered, but there was no direction on that. Council, if you recall, had asked us to stick with the bylaw that was in place, educate and continue with enforcement. So nothing further on that exemption.
Okay, so that's something later. Okay. Good. Okay, thank you very much. Can I get a motion to accept that for info, please? Councillor Rowley, all in favor? So thank you. 9.2, Q2 financial report. So we have on our lovely devices our financial report for Q2. Would you like to speak to it, Mr. Sharp?
Sure, thank you, through the mayor. Before you is our Q2 financial variance report to the end of June. There are a number of things in there, a number of notes associated with the variances that you see, as well as the projection to the end of the fiscal year that we're expecting. A couple of comments on that. You'll note the year-end projections are the best that we can come up with at such an early date in the year, and we expect that we'll zero out in most areas of the budget, but if there was something already that we're aware of that we missed or that might be a funding pressure, we've tried to capture that in the year-end budget. And as well as in the notes, the explanations for the variances. As we move along further in the year, we'll have a greater degree of accuracy in where we think we'll finish at the end of the year. But I'm open to any questions that the council may have.
Perfect, thank you. Council? Any questions? Councillor Hamilton?
I have just a small question for clarification. Number 1, the reserve draw shows as a favorable variance. Should that be unfavorable, as we didn't budget for that?
So you're talking about on the revenue side, Councillor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't budgeted for, it was a transfer from reserves, so think of it as a cash infusion or any other additional revenue that might have come through the budget. And so it shows as a favorable change to the revenues for the year. But there will be a corresponding offset on the expenses when the money is spent.
Okay, thank you. Where? Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Wilkie?
On the IT services, it's a fairly meaningful miss year to date, and it sounds like these are exceedances there. Is that something that we expect will wash out over the remainder of the year, or is that truly incremental charges that are above what we anticipated?
So in those cases, we're not optimistic those will wash out. Those are in addition to the contracted service, or what we would get for the bundle, if you will, that we've prepaid for with our IT provider. We're hopeful that that will level off and we won't see that number get any worse, but we don't expect that to zero before the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Questions? Concerns? Good. Alright, I'd just like to say I like the format. It's nice and easy to read. Favorable, unfavorable is a beautiful way just to lay it out. Thank you for this, and I'll get a motion to accept for information, please. Wilkie. All in favor? Pass, thank you. 9.3, Emergency Management Report. Sure. You're gonna get her going? Yep. I'm just
Mayor
gonna get
Crane,
up.
while we're getting settled here, we have our Director of Emergency Management, Mr. Jerry, coming to give his quarterly report to you folks on what he's been working on over the last quarter and what the next quarter looks like moving forward.
Excellent. Mr. Rook, you can just hit your little red button. And I'll illuminate you.
Are
You
you there?
now have the floor. You're good to go whenever it is. Thank you for coming this evening, by the way.
You don't have this memorized, Mr. Rook?
I take
And a paperback.
Okay.
Just give me a nod when you want me to.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
Uh-oh.
That could be difficult. Let's just
That could be
remember your
difficult.
drill.
Is that correct?
Ah,
We'll try one more time and then we'll just wing it.
Give her a real nod.
did that show up in your agenda that way?
Yeah,
No.
no, I
All
can
the
see
words
it in the
are-
Ours
agenda.
is.
Agenda's fine.
Loaded good.
Agenda has a gray background.
Oh, this is so weird.
Do you have a copy? That's how it started, I can't remember. There it is.
No, but there's no words.
There's no words
No
in it,
words.
no text.
Background color.
Okay, let's throw it up and I will speak around the pictures. That's
Okay.
Yeah, throw up the pictures.
Alright, so a quarterly report for emergency and disaster management in Turner Valley for the second quarter of the year. I'm just gonna touch on a few of the more important things that have occurred during that second quarter. So certainly during this quarter, the emergency management bylaw was passed by council and came into effect, and so that saw the conclusion of that revision. Wonderful to be able to complete that. It sort of ensures that we meet the requirements of the local authorities emergency management regulation, which is coming into effect January 1st, 2020. So wonderful to get that done. And I'm rather excited about some of the changes, some of the small tweaks that we did to the bylaw. I believe that this bylaw is going to give us a much more defined roles for council, both before and during an emergency. But more importantly, I believe it's going to encourage a more collaborative approach to emergency planning for Turner Valley, which is going to go a long way in effective public safety, etc. Public education. During Discovery Days, we set up a booth out there, and we were working on public education in three main areas. The first, we were handing out brochures and speaking to people about some of the mass notification systems that we use, so the importance of subscribing to the Alberta Emergency Alert System and the Safe Communities Alert Network. We were also doing some work around the 72-hour prepared program, having people having medications, food, that sort of thing to last them for 3 days in the event of an emergency or disaster. And we also did sort of a highlight of this booth this year was talking about wildland-urban interface. Certainly in the past few years throughout Alberta, the wildland-urban interface has become an increased issue. Fort Mac, Slave Lake, high-level fire, that sort of thing. And so starting to do a little bit of public education around what people can do to protect their homes during those incidents. Well abandonments were completed actually in the fourth quarter, but most of the work was done during the second quarter. So in terms of involvement for that, did a lot of work working with Crescent Point to collaborate on the preparation of their emergency response plan. Legislation requires that for every well abandonment they do, they create a site-specific emergency response plan, provide public notifications and information on what that plan looks like and the work and activities that are being done. So I worked with Crescent Point in developing that. Also participated in the pre-abandonment meetings. So just before they do the wells, they have large breakfasts where all the contractors and all the people that will be involved in working on that well sort of congregate to go over the work in progress, the plans, and I intend to ensure that the emergency response portion is well defined in terms of the roles and responsibilities of industry in the town. And then as they went on, monitored progress every day. They would send me a report on what was happening and how it was being completed. I need to just pause and say that industry, especially the oil and gas industry, has done a tremendous job, especially in the last 2 years, but over the last 10 years in terms of these well abandonments and taking care of some of the orphan wells. It has a lot of benefits for the community. From an emergency management standpoint, it's virtually the elimination of hazards within our town, so it's gone a long way towards making Turner Valley a safer place to live.
And I understand Crescent Point is they're like on well number 6 of abandoning in our area, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Hats off to them.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Spring and summer. So spring and summer is an interesting little bit of time from emergency and disaster management standpoint. It's really the height of most of the potential for natural disasters in Turner Valley. So the typical progress is early in the spring. As soon as the snow melts, we get into the wildfire season. We've got all those tall, pure grass standing up, and the wind starts to blow, and we get a little bit of a wildfire season. Certainly this year, it was a very short period. We had a lot of humidity, a lot of rainfall, and green up came early this year. And then we get into the riverine flooding situation. So the spring rainfall brings the potential for flooding, so monitoring that. And then as we move into the end of June, July, and this year well into August, we get into the sort of the thunderstorm series. And thunderstorm series are, I think for most of us, we don't consider that to be a major threat, but certainly they bring wind, a lot of hail damage, potential for tornadoes. Alberta actually set a lifetime record this year with 22 total tornadoes, up from an average of 12 would be the normal procedure. Several of them at the EF2 scale, which is enough to rip roofs off houses and that sort of thing, so monitoring those. During those months, I received 132 weather alerts from Environment Canada. And just to show the varied weather we've had, they sort of start out with extreme snowfall events, work through the thunderstorms, heavy rainfall events, and of course the air quality from the fires up north. I'm sure that we remember just before Discovery Day some of the smoke that came down. Also do a little bit of work throughout the season with the River Forecast Center in terms of monitoring precipitation and riverine events, looking at weather stations and the hydrometric station that's located between Turner Valley and Black Diamond to watch what's happening with the river, and of course with the Canadian Wildfire Information System to monitor those. June, we had a bit of a precipitation event. So on the 18th of June, I was actually contacted by the River Forecast Center. They were watching a precipitation event that was going to be severe enough that it had caught their attention. And what they had done is they take the precipitation and they do a little bit of river modeling to determine an approximation, because predicting rainfall is a little bit tricky even now, but an approximation of how much the river was coming up. And they were predicting between 1 to 1.5 meters in rise throughout this event. So that was enough to catch my curiosity as well. That's certainly getting very, very close to the amount of rainfall that would be required to pose a bit of an issue to the residents along the North Royal Light Way, down at the bottom So during the next few days, brief stakeholders, CAO, members of our Turner Valley Incident Management Team, Public Works, RCMP, industry, etc., and just essentially monitored whether or not this precipitation event was going to come to fruition. On the 21st of June, it did rain, quite heavily. In contacting Crescent Point, they contacted their head office and made the decision to shut in 2 of their wells that were along the river that potentially could be impacted for the event. And at the end of the day, at 21:30 hours that night, the river reached a height of 2 meters with no impacts. The saving grace for us was actually the temperatures. So a lot of our river basin was received snowfall instead of rain, which muted the effect of the precipitation.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, a picture. So just to give you a little bit of a background of what sorts of things we do to monitor rivers, the area indicated in blue is actually the Sheep River watershed. So any precipitation that falls within that blue area will find its way into the rivers and make its way towards Turner Valley, Black Diamond, and then on down the river towards Okotoks. Our basin is essentially split into 2. 3 Point Creek drains the top portion, and the Sheep River sort of drains the area within the red circle. I'll call them Gulf Tees. The red arrows are Turner Valley and Okotoks, just to give you a sense of scale. I'll just call them Gulf Tees, for water, better language. The 3 on the left are actually hydrometric stations, precipitation stations. So I can watch those to determine how much rainfall is coming onto the basin, whether or not it's approaching what the River Forecast Center has done their modeling for. I look at 6-hour, 12-hour, and 48-hour precipitation to see what's happening there. The Gulf Tee on the right is actually the hydrometric station in between Turner Valley and Black Diamond, which measures the actual river flow and height of the river. So sort of keep an eye on that. And just as I guess it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, but I think the general perception is that snowmelt is what causes riverine flooding, and that's absolutely incorrect. Melting snow doesn't contribute very much to the riverine flow at all. As a matter of fact, it's somewhere to the tune of about 4 mils per hour versus rainfall. For example, during the 2013 flood, we were hitting 150 mils per hour. So it sort of pales in comparison. So really what I do is watch the precipitation events, and there we can see the graph from those stations. Where the green arrow is marking, we did take 100 millimeters at that Sheep River 2 station, but further west received a snowfall. Oh, yep. And this is the graphing from the hydrometric station. So you can see the green arrow got quite a sharp increase over a period of 6 or 8 hours. Came up about 1 meter instead of the 1.5 meters that we would have had it not been snow. The second last thing I'll talk about is wildland urban interface fires. This is an area that Turner Valley Emergency and Disaster Management has been doing quite a bit of work on over the course of the last year. Residents of Turner Valley will tell you that one of the things that we love about our town is the natural beauty, and a big part of that is the tree and the grasslands that we have around us. Unfortunately, one of the potentials with that is for wildfire. Down on the bottom left is some of the work we did late last year around mapping the fuel types. So in the green are areas of tall green grass that potentially in the early spring and the late fall can cure. And in the orange are the areas of the deciduous forests that we love around here. The picture on the right is actually, I spent a little bit of time up in High Level this summer on the wildfire, and that's a picture. The forest type up there is exactly the same as what we have around here. So this is the populous trees, the poplar and the aspen that we enjoy so much around here, and it can really burn. So over the course of last year, we've done a lot of work around emergency training with the fire department. They were well trained in wildland fire before, but we've done quite a bit of certification, entered into mutual aid agreements with Alberta Forestry and Agriculture to ensure a good response. But the point that I really want to talk about here is the construction of the structural protection unit. So during this quarter, this was the main thrust, did a lot of work around procuring the equipment for this and actually building this trailer. And it is essentially a giant sprinkler trailer. So inside, we have equipment to do everything from securing water supply off hydrants. We have pumps to move water, and these, we call them pumpkins, portable bladders, to supply water. And inside, we have a whole ton of these Rainbird sprinklers, good old-fashioned brass impact sprinklers. And believe it or not, this is the state-of-the-art when it comes to wildland-urban interface firefighting. It also has thousands of feet of hose and adapters to put all this stuff together. The way that this is used is in two ways. One way is to establish a perimeter line. So we have in these backpacks the hose, they can run them out, and then we quickly attach sprinklers to them and set them up. And the basic premise is wet fuel doesn't burn. So it stops everything from burning. During our tests, our first test, we were able to establish 1,600 feet in 14 minutes of perimeter line. So this will be very useful to deploy in areas where we can't get firefighting apparatus or areas where it's too dangerous for firefighters to engage the fire directly. By setting this up, they can work in behind that wet line where conditions are a little bit safer to extinguish the fire. The other way that these can be deployed is actually directly on structures and on houses. So here we have an example of sprinklers up on the roof of this house, and down the bottom left you can see the results. Wet fuel simply doesn't burn, so we've got that beautiful little island of green that was protected from the wildfire. Next quarter, we're looking at quite a bit of training to meet the requirements of the local authority's emergency regulation. Everybody with a role in emergency management is required to take the basic emergency management course, so we've started to schedule that, and staff are underway in doing that training. We've got an ICS 100 course coming up the end of this month to make sure that everybody's up to speed on that. The other things that we're working on is reviewing the emergency management plan and updating some of those sections for presentation to the Emergency Advisory Committee. And then finally, working on the hazard inventory and risk assessment. Every year we look at the hazards and risks within town and rank them, and that sort of serves as one of the foundational guides for the areas that we focus on and concentrate on for emergency management.
Fantastic. Any questions from council? I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Wilkie.
One question, less related to your report and then more related to some of the well abandonments that have been going on. So it sounds like you have a fairly good dialogue with Crescent Point then. There were some concerns about some sulfur smells around over the last few days. When things like that happen, who is it that people should be in touch with to get that question answered, to figure out if there's something that they should be worried about? I mean, I trust that, you know, you'll let us know if there's anything we do need to be worried about, but that question does come up.
That's a great question.
So the serious point to make here is whenever there is a concern about a danger to public safety, etc., emergency management starts with first responders, police, fire, and EMS. And the way that we contact them is 911. So I know that for most people that seems a little bit extreme, etc., but this is the role of the fire department. When there's a concern, we do a lot of, they're actually called odor complaints, where there's a smell of foot in the air, that sort of thing. The fire department has gas detection equipment, has H2S detection equipment. They will respond, locate the source, and emergency management, if it is a serious incident, would be kicked up from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Good? Good. You betcha. Councillor Gordon, thanks you for your
Accept his
presentation.
information.
Accepts his information. All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Next up, we have, well, 9.4 is action tracking. Did you want to do, we'll stick with it? Okay, 9.4, action tracking report.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Crane. Before you is the quarterly action tracker that we present, which in a nutshell rolls up any motions or resolutions of council that required administrative action or something to be completed. Things appear to be right on track. If there's an item in there that appears active, Although the resolution or the action required of council may have been completed, if the activity or the event, for example, is still open-ended, we leave it open as active. Okay, so just some clarity on that. But if councilors have any questions about the action tracker, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Waring?
Could you just refresh me on the colour scheme, blue and green, please?
Green is complete.
No?
So green is complete, blue is active.
Because some of the greens say active stuff.
Just the one.
Just the one, I think.
Yeah, the first one.
The meet and greet this fall.
Yeah.
It's just one.
That's the only one. I
That
think.
may just have been a slip on our
Okay, so,
Yeah, just
so
colored or shaded the wrong color.
the green is completed and the
Yeah.
blue is active. There you go. I'm sure you told me that it wasn't.
All right, excellent. So, council, any concerns, any questions? Seeing none, good, happy with it, perfect. Councillor Hamilton makes a motion to accept this information. All in favor? Excellent, that's unanimous, thank you. Moving on to 9.5. Municipal Enforcement Q2 Report. Mr. Bowman. Go ahead, Mr. Sharp.
Sure, so while Officer Bowman is taking a seat, he's gonna present to you his second quarter statistical report and report on his activities.
Perfect, you wanna hit your little button there, perfect, you have the floor, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. My precinct comments will be made through the chair to the mayor and council, so, and any questions thereafter. Before council, you have our Q2 report running from April till June 2019. The first page you have in front of you should give you a statistical breakdown of traffic infractions, provincial infractions, liquor and gaming, and bylaw infractions we've dealt with this quarter. And the 2019 total date, or 2019 totals, that is our Q2. The 2018 totals on the right are the year end for last year. So not to be confused where we're looking at when we're looking at totals, okay? Some of the highlights in this definitely would be liquor and cannabis. This quarter we've only had one cannabis related complaint, and that was on private property. So that was it. That was dealt with through other channels. To date, our cannabis issues have not materialized. However, again, as the public gets more comfortable with it, I expect we'll see a rise in that. Going through, we had 184 complaints we dealt with this quarter. On the second page here, you see what the complaint types we're dealing with. They include assisting fire, EMS, the RCMP, traffic operations, meaning driving complaints, animal complaints, animals being impounded, community standards, and property violation or property responsibility violations, basically the unsightly bylaw. Our animal control this quarter, we had 15 animal complaints, and out of that, five animals were impounded. Our traffic enforcement, again, we see an increase in this in the summertime or in the spring. An area of concern for us again is DeKalta and 16th Avenue. I think I've discussed this before with council. Unfortunately, people's GPSs are sending and bypassing Black Diamond, and they're using DeKalta Imperial or DeKalta and 16th Avenue 434, and they're not aware of the speed limits despite increased presence, automated speed signs, and increased enforcement. So we continue with that. We also, in May, we also held our bike safety training with the Turner Valley School. And in that we enlisted the help of Devin Bartek and Justin Nagy's, both peace officers with the town of Black Diamond and Longview. And in addition, we also had some of the parents come down and some staff volunteers who helped fix the bikes as we ran the children through safety obstacle courses, provided them with some traffic safety tips, and were able to feed them lunch at the end of the day. So all in all, it's actually a really fun day for everybody. They get to see us not behind cars, but actually talking to them, and some some of the comments would, you shake your head at. So, actually a really good day. Again, community standards bylaw, cannabis, we touched on that already, again, decriminalized in October 2018, again, only one complaint. Property responsibility bylaw, community unsightly property, bylaw. Again, we tend to see increases in the spring. We tend to deal with, and we try to deal with these properties on a proactive basis. However, with the complaints, we do follow up fairly quickly. A majority of the complaints we're receiving are unoccupied, meaning vacant lands or unoccupied rental houses. We've had to follow up with numerous landlords on these matters, and in Q3, you'll see an increase in the number of tickets that actually had to be written when we're not getting the compliance we need, so. Okay, if Mayor or many members of council have any questions, I'll be open.
Any questions from council? My question would be this: when someone starts setting off loud fireworks at 4 a.m. in our neighborhood, and everyone thinks it's gunshots. Seriously though, how would we handle that? Because really that's kind of in your wheelhouse at 4 a.m., but I went looking for any findings I could pinpoint a house, but I couldn't.
A situation like that is 4 a.m. we don't have shifts that run that late. The RCMP certainly do though, and by all means, they're in hand. Their job is also to enforce our bylaws. They're well versed in them. They have a copy of them. And if you have concerns, and again, some people don't know the difference between a gunshot and a firework. You're better off erring on the side of caution. And again, give the RCMP a call and all of them never attend.
Good. Excellent. Any questions regarding the report? Looks quite clear to me. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Answer.
Good job. Excellent. Okay, we get a motion to accept, and Councillor Waring makes that motion. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on, we have administrative responses. 10.1, Councillor Cindy Holladay's Bill 7 summary request. You want to give us a quick rundown on that, and then we'll just accept for information. Oh, hit his button. Oh, I got it. You got it. Just looking for a reason to, get up and move. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor Crane.
Go ahead.
In Councillor Holliday's absence, just a very quick overview of her inquiry. It was, can administration provide a summary of Bill 7, which is also known as a property tax incentive bill at the provincial level. And quite simply, Bill 7 allows municipalities to decide if and how to implement any sort of tax incentives for non-residential properties by passing a single bylaw that will offer incentives to reduce or exempt or defer the collection of property taxes, and also establish an eligibility criteria and application process for those property owners to apply. So, in a nutshell, it's an ability for a municipality to incentivize investment.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Council, any comments? Nope. Councillor Rab?
I'll just make a motion to accept.
Motion for information, good. All in favor? Thank you. Administrative inquiries. Mr. Sharp, did we receive any?
Yes,
in the
we had one from
deadline? We
Councillor
did.
Gordon.
Yes, we did. Councillor Gordon, do you have it prepared, or would you like?
He's ready to read it.
Yeah, if you'd like to read it, Mr. Sharp, and then answer.
I apologize, I didn't bring a copy, Councillor.
All right, Councillor Gordon.
Sure, I'll try to remember it from memory here. But this question is regarding a couple of our key strategic priorities regarding pathways and also river access. My wife and I were out for a walk a couple weeks back, and from DeKalta heading west up the river, we walked on the older berm that was part of the DVRP, our disaster relief plan. And then there's an extension to that berm now that drops down a little bit and then comes up towards the water treatment plant. And the berm extends with the pathway for a minor amount, and then it just becomes armoring on the north side of the Sheep River there. Just wondering if there's plans to extend that berm all the way up so that a proper pathway could be developed.
Go ahead.
So by extend berm, you mean increase the size or level it off at the top?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there are no plans to do anything of that sort. As far as adding any sort of pathway to the top of the berm, there are no plans to do that. It's a common question though, Councillor Gordon, because many residents see pathways at the top of berms, especially in cities like Medicine Hat and Calgary where they've done flood mitigation. But those sorts of pathways were installed by the municipality out of their own funds on top of what they received from the province and the feds.
Councillor Murray?
Just for your information, the land on the north side of the berm isn't owned by the property owners. There's a strip of land where a pathway could go, and that's been checked by Gary Malenka's people.
Cool.
And they actually did put markers along there to show where the property lines are. So if we did ever decide to run a pathway from the Calder Bridge west along the riverbank, connecting finally up with the rest of town, Turnegate, yeah, it's quite feasible.
With permission from the province. Because that's provincially owned.
Municipally.
It's municipally owned.
Oh.
That land.
Cool.
Oh, I thought it was the province.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that little
Come to
update.
our open house next week.
Ah, there's an open house next
Yeah,
week.
come to the open house, you'll learn a lot.
All right, thank you very much. So that's good. Excellent. We don't need a motion to accept that for information. It's good. Correct? Yep, good. Okay, so administrative inquiries are good. 12, bylaws and policies. 12.1, the governance and priorities committee terms of reference. Let me just get that up here. All right, Mr. Sharp.
I'm on this.
Oh, sorry, we're gonna have an intro first.
Sure.
There we go.
My intro, Mayor Crane, is to let you know that Councillor Ab, who sits on that working group, is gonna give us an overview.
That's a fantastic segue, I love it. Councillor Rapp, why don't you lead us through this?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As you know, we've been talking about a finance committee for some time, and in conjunction with finance governance and lots of the models we see in other municipalities, they have governance and finance, and they have various breakdowns of those. So when the three of us councillors, that being Wilkie and Holladay and myself, sat down with two members of staff, we looked at it and thought it was best to break it down into a governance committee and then a finance committee, because they have different mandates and different compositions that we saw anyway. So the staff was excellent about preparing a draft document for both of those, or terms of reference for both of those committees, and they gave us all kinds of opportunities to react to it and to fine tune it, and we, or I at least, am fairly happy with this. That being said, there might be some other possible amendments to that. So I assume that all of you read it, and I'd like to present it to you for consideration. I make a motion to consider it and give you a chance for feedback.
Perfect. Okay, motion accepted. And we're gonna start off with Councillor Wilkie.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Echo all of what Councillor Rob said. I appreciate the work that went into drafting the terms. I think it's a great idea to give this a forum to discuss some governance issues outside of the formal confines of the regular council structure, and that's a great opportunity for us. That said, the one amendment that I would like to propose is under communications, I propose adding following at the end of number 10 on the terms of reference that video recordings of GPAC meetings shall be publicly available online. This is a committee that would include all of the members of council, and I believe that in that instance, with no members at large, for transparency's sake, we should have those meetings recorded, but I propose that amendment and throw it out for discussion.
Okay, excellent. So that sounds like a healthy amendment. Go ahead, Councillor Rob.
And we did have that discussion, the three of us, along with the staff as well, and, you know, we sort of left it as is, and I think it's for our whole council to consider. And I think the beauty of this governance committee is it gives us a chance, it's a committee as a whole basically, and it gives us a chance to talk about important issues that could be coming up, and where you have a chance to debate them in a non-formal atmosphere. It's much more relaxed, and therefore you can get to deal with all the sides prior to bringing it to council. So I think it's a great idea, and it's meets 4 times a year, and it could have a big impact for us, I believe.
Councillor Ware.
Fully agree with the idea of the committee, and the work that's been done is much appreciated by admin and by the council reps. And I'm firmly in favour of these meetings being televised, if you like, and give every opportunity to the public to be involved.
Don't date yourself there. Excellent. Councillor Gordon, and then Councillor Hamilton.
For sure, I'll speak to the effectiveness, or at least to the support of this. I think a governance committee, committee of the whole, looking at things where we have options to deliberate without decision making, I think is paramount to our needs, especially with the fact that we only meet twice a month throughout our regular council meeting. Hopefully this will allow for that deliberation to take place in an orderly fashion, so that some of our other meetings are better move forward in a timely fashion, if I can leave it at that.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Anything to add, Councillor Hamilton?
No, I have nothing.
You're good, okay. I agree. Let's vote on the amendment first, and then we'll move on.
Can I read the,
Absolutely, go ahead, Heather.
the council approved the Governance and Priorities Advisory Committee terms of reference by amending section 10, adding video recordings of these meetings will be made publicly available.
That sounds good. Is that, meet your criteria? All right, sounds good to me. Again, I'd reiterate everything you guys have said. This is a great step forward and a great way for transparency and open debate, so. Okay, all in favor of said motion? Perfect. And now, just to finish it off, because that was an amendment.
No, she
She put it together as one.
She did put it together.
Yeah, Ms. Thompson put it together
Okay.
as one motion.
Yep.
It's,
Okay.
it's a motion, I was gonna do that.
No,
We
she
didn't have
got
to.
it.
Friendly and
Didn't
then
have to,
I'm good.
because it was covered in the motion that.
That's why I looked at Wilkie and said,
We're
are you
good.
good?
Yeah,
He said,
it's
good,
good.
you're good. As long as you're good, Brad,
Always.
I think the world is a great place.
Always, man.
Perfect, okay. We are on to Finance Advisory Committee terms of reference. Mr. Sharp, would you like to introduce Councillor Wilkie?
So,
I'm gonna cut you off. Go ahead, Wilkie.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp and Mayor Crane. Yeah, these two committees came out of what started as one discussion, but we came to the realization that there are kind of separate subject matters to be discovered or deliberated under these committees. The governance committee really is something that should include all of council, whereas the finance committee we view as something that can help provide recommendations and financial oversight on behalf of council, and is more suited to either council members with some financial background, and then in particular this council or this committee terms of reference proposes including 2 members at large that have some amount of public sector financial accounting experience or reporting experience or planning audit experience. So I think it's just a great opportunity to be able to dig into the details in a separate setting, and then bring forward recommendations for the broader council. It just allows us to be a little more thorough in our diligence. That's the intent of this. As I mentioned, the committee, as proposed, consists of 3 councillors, and 2 members at large. With the specific experience we talked about, the members at large would be for a 4-year staggered term. That's the proposal. Meetings open to the public, as is kind of generally accepted with our committees with members at large. We don't include video recording, but very open to the public meetings. And the idea is to review key issues and make recommendations on a number of areas that are listed in those terms of reference, but in particular, it's just generally financial issues that are in front of council. I fully support this, and again, appreciate the work of both Ms. Thompson and Corinne and the entire administration on bringing this together. I think we've got a great proposal that should provide some positive momentum to our finance initiatives going forward.
Excellent, well put. Any questions from council?
I have one.
Please direct it to Mr. Get your,
Oh, I'm still on, there we go.
Perfect. Under number 5, we have working principles. We have several lists here. Just a question regarding how council is delegating to the committee this authority regarding, obviously it's not an exhaustive list, but we're talking about reserve levels here, and there's often some concern about the right reserve levels. So based on the conversations you guys have had within your committee and the work group setting up this terms of reference, can you give me some parameters that you may be considering?
sure, go ahead.
I think it'd be pretty broad reaching. At this point, it's exploratory in nature. As we go forward, the committee will set that mandate, I think, and decide on what the criteria are around adequacy and how to evaluate that. But it's definitely one of the top of mind principles going forward, is making sure that we're correctly setting aside for future infrastructure spending.
Thank you very much. Again, as a term of reference, it looks very good, very detailed. My question for admin, once this goes forward, if it goes forward, you then advertise for members at large. What happens then? Where are we going from then? Just give us a little blink into the future.
Sure, thanks for the opportunity, Mayor Crane. The next step on the September 3rd council meeting is to present a committee's bylaw. The committee's bylaw would be the bylaw that would, all of our terms of reference for our various Turner Valley committees of council would roll up under. As you know, we have bylaws for our all of our intermunicipal committees. Councillor Gordon and Councillor Waring sit on one of them with ECDEV. But locally within Turner Valley we don't. They were rescinded some time ago, and instead of having individual bylaws for each committee, we're going to have a bylaw for one that the terms of reference will roll under. So on September the 3rd, you'll see first reading of that bylaw. Assuming there are no problems, at some point second and third reading will be given, either that evening if it's that straightforward, or in the following meeting. And then we would need to appoint council reps to those committees formally. Right now the council reps are just appointed to the working groups to establish terms of reference. And when that's completed, we would go to the public looking for members at large, very similar to what we just did with FCSS or ECDEV or others. Assuming there's no disruptions to that and we don't anticipate any, I would think that those committees would likely have members at large appointed and an orientation commencing sometime mid-November.
Nice, excellent. So it's a work in progress.
Yep.
Just like everything else, so it's good. And no, we won't pass 3 things in one night, Councillor Waring. He turned a little green down there, but.
His lights flashing.
Yeah, right. Oh, do you want to say it? Okay, I'll let you say it, go ahead.
What am I supposed to say? I don't know. I was thinking about something else.
Some
No, I was gonna say what Mr. Sharp brought up an interesting point, because when the 3 of us met with admin, we talked about having, or Ms. Thompson said it would be wise to have a bylaw that would encompass all of our committees. Terms of references would be then fall into place, and as opposed to having a bylaw for every one of these organizations, that made perfect sense to me. So I think just to re-emphasize what you're talking about, Mr. Sharp, that this would make sense to me. So hopefully it'll come through and it'll make perfect sense to all of us.
You bet. Okay, sounds good. Councillor Hamilton?
I just wanted to say a quick thanks to the advisory committee and to administration. This is something we've been talking about for, I'd say, 2 years come October, so it's really great to see that, it's here. We've got some terms of reference and we're ready to get going, and it looks like early into the fall we'll be getting our members at large, so thank you.
Perfect. Any other comments? I'm gonna call a question. You good? Okay, all in favor of accepting, terms of reference? And who made that motion?
I'll make
Mr. Wiltshire.
Mrs. Wilkie, yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just, there's a very deliberate, recommendation in that RFP that's gonna direct, administration to complete the committee's
Let's see.
bylaw, so I just wanna make sure.
Option one, you wanna read it, Councillor Wilkie?
Sure. Make a motion that council approve the Finance Advisory Committee terms of reference as presented and directs administration to prepare the committee bylaw to which these terms will be attached to be put forward for first reading at the September 3rd, 2019 regular business meeting of council.
Perfect. All in favor of that motion? And there you go, that's passed. Perfect, thank you. Alright, moving on. Old business, nope, sorry, jumped the gun there. 12.3, health and safety policy. Alright, Mr. Sharp, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Crane. One small piece regarding our health and safety policy. Administration would like to add one small paragraph to our policy that helps our policy reflect the importance of health and safety to not just physical but psychological, social well-being and productivity to volunteers, contractors, suppliers, customers and visitors. So it extends well beyond employees. So this is just a small housekeeping, not a small housekeeping change, but an administrative change to the policy that would reflect that that intent. So over to council for their blessing.
Thank you. Any comments on the highlighted paragraph?
Motion first?
Yeah, I'll take a motion. Councillor Gordon, give me a motion, go ahead.
Yeah, the motion is that council approves the amendment to the health and safety policy, MPL 0102.
Thank you. Any comments? All right, all in favor? Excellent, thank you. Moving on. Now we have old business. Utility water sewer distribution servicing agreement. All right, Mr. Sharp.
Thank you. So before you, council, is a long overdue agreement that we've worked on with the County of Foothills to provide maintenance and management of our water and sewer distribution system. You'll recall that as of November the 1st, the county took over the operations of the Sheep River Utility Corporation. And with that was the transfer of our employees over to the county. They were the qualified operators that were required to operate the water treatment plant and associated infrastructure. So when those employees left the employment of Turner Valley and went to the county, we lost the capability to maintain our infrastructure, and we knew that was part of the process. And with that, we had a couple of options. We could have contracted out the service, but the logical next step was to go to the county for that service because of the familiarity with our infrastructure. And to be quite honest, contracting that out to another municipality is much less expensive than contracting, the assumption of the costs associated with contracting the service out. So before you use the agreement, it's quite a long agreement, but really the high notes are in the RFD. So the operating services will be provided on a cost recovery basis. The prices that will be charged to us are very explicit in the agreement, all inclusive of all expenses. All of our water mains, water lines, valves, and other associated appurtenances will be managed under that agreement, and a number of other items that are set forth in the RFD. We'll continue to manage the service, so any sort of sale of the water utility sewer, expenses, meter readings, that sort of a thing, the town, staff will still handle. It will just be the operations and maintenance of that infrastructure. So today we are asking administration to direct the CAO to finalize this deal. We've worked with the county on it and just looking for council's blessing.
Thank you. I will get a motion and then we will open it up for a bit of discussion here. So, Councillor Waring? Oh, sorry, Rob. Go ahead, Waring.
The council directed administration to enter into an operating agreement with Foothills County to transfer the operation of its water distribution and sewage collection infrastructure to the county.
Thank you. Councillor Rapp?
Yeah, when I first read this, I was my attention was drawn to number 7, which is on sewage collection, because Councillor Waring and I are members of the West End, and we're presently in the process of looking at governance, and Shrek may be a possibility, we're not sure. But when I spoke to Mr. Sharp this morning, he assured me that this is just maintaining our end of the bargain until such time that, you know, whatever we do in the future could be, but in the meantime, we still have to worry about, you know, storm sewers and proper sewer things. I'm not exactly sure about putting in chemicals, if that is done by us or by the present operators, which is Black Diamond. I'm not sure about that one, part B there, but I'm sure Mr. Sharp will work that out and make sure that it makes perfect sense. So, just so you know that I was concerned about that, but it's not an issue to me any longer.
Excellent. Councillor Wilkie?
This is getting to be a familiar refrain, but bear with the guy who wasn't here for the original agreement. I was elected after the Shrek handoff to the county took place. Shrek operations handoff to the county took place. So, just so I can understand what's happening right now, are we contracting those services from the county at this point in time? And so that's the first question. And then the second question would be, what is the alternative here? Would it be third-party contracting, or what else would fill the void here? What's also an alternative?
Mr. Sharp?
Thanks, Councillor Wilkie. So currently, yes, we are using the county to manage that infrastructure for us, because it was the shortcut. We could not do that. And so currently, we're working on an informal agreement. Not informal, we're working under the terms of this agreement, even though this agreement has not been signed until such time as we have a finalized agreement with them. So anything in fiscal year 2019 has been by these price points, the substantiation that's required in that, and anything else that's in there. The alternative, there would be 2 alternatives to this. One would be to contract out a service provider that would have not only the expertise but the qualifications as per the provincial standards to be able to monitor that. And the other alternative would be to hire somebody in-house. We're not quite sure how much work that would be. We estimate it would be about a 1/2 full-time equivalent that would be needed to do the monitoring, the flushing, the testing, and all those other things that we wouldn't look elsewhere to do. So the repair of water lines and digging big holes and all that sort of a thing are done by contractors as it stands, but the oversight and other aspects of it would be done, could be done by an in-house employee.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, so point of clarification, you picked up on it there at the end of your comment. This is for the maintenance, not for the repair in the event of a burst water line, is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, at the end of the day, the county would be responsible for that. Whether they did that in-house or contracted that out would be up to them. But currently, the county is contracting out those services. The same way we were when we were operating truck and had these staff in-house. We just don't have the spare parts or the equipment to be fixing those things in a small municipality.
So to put it into context, for example, it's midnight, water line breaks, you still call O'Leary, now the county calls O'Leary. O'Leary shows up, digs it up, tunes it off till the morning, takes care of it, packs it in, they deal with the county, they don't deal with us, water distribution is taken care of, neighbors got their water back on. Perfect. So, sounds good to me. Councillor Wilkie?
Still the new guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So the employees that we're contracting, the county and now county employees that we would be contracting to perform this work, the way that I read this or see this is that if we're contracting them to perform work under this agreement, they would then not be performing work under the Schrock operating agreement. So do we get credit on the other side of it? Because we're, I don't wanna be double paying people here, and that's what I'm just trying to wrap my head around. I'm not sure how the other agreement works.
Finance committee. Go ahead.
So, there's two aspects of providing water to residents. The first is the treatment of it and the wholesaling of it, and this other side is the distribution. So Schrock is responsible for treating water and providing it wholesale to its customers. That would be the county, to a lesser extent, and then Black Diamond and Turner Valley. Once it leaves the front door and enters the distribution system, whether that be for the county or Black Diamond or Turner Valley, it's our responsibility to maintain that infrastructure. So the Schrock's agreement with the county to operate the water treatment plant and everything else that's required to treat water is not to be confused with our agreement with the county to maintain our distribution system. Two very separate things. Our agreement is not with Schrock for maintenance of the distribution system. Our agreement is with the county over here. I see they're not the same. They're the same personnel, but they're not the same entities.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, the same number of employees went over, right? Like it's that same number of employees. We're doing, before, those employees were managing Schrock and handling this job, right? So now, how is the county getting paid by Schrock? Are they getting charged on a cost of service basis similar to what this arrangement is? Or are they being billed out at an annual full-time salary for those work? I'm just trying to understand that, and that part of that's just me not being here for the initial Schrock agreement.
Go ahead.
So there are some aspects of the Schrock operation that are complete cost recovery. So the operations, the operating staff, for example, that are 100% attributable to that water treatment plant and the production of clean drinking water are part of the operating expense, the Schrock operating expense. There are other smaller aspects of Schrock where it's not a full-time requirement. For example, the CEO of Schrock is, and I don't know the precise percentage, but it's only a fraction of his bigger job. So Schrock reimburses the county for the time spent working on Schrock items, proportional to the time spent. The total cost of Schrock in its operations is then passed on in a proportionate share to each of its three shareholders. That's for Schrock operations. What we're doing on the other end is simply asking the county, not Schrock, to maintain our system. Is it equivalent to a half-time FTE? We're not sure yet. We don't have any historicals because all of the work that those three operators were doing to maintain our system was built into their broader job description, and so we weren't keeping detailed notes on how much time they were spending on our distribution system. So we estimate a half-time.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen.
Bear with me.
No, absolutely. No, go ahead. These are all great questions.
So just one follow-up to that. I think the answer that I got from that is if we had 3 employees before that we were paying as 3 FTEs, right? If one of those employees is now dedicating half an FTE to operating our facility, that allocation of time then would happen at the county level. The county would allocate 50% of his time and bill 50% of his time to Schrock, or her, sorry, my bad, to Schrock, and 50% of that time then would get billed to the town for under this. Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
And further to that, it may not be that same employee working for Schruck that's helping us with the
Yes.
distribution
Yeah.
system. It could be somebody from the other side of the county. I'm exaggerating, but it may not be that Schruck employee, that, oftentimes it will be, but it may not be. It
Okay,
could be
but that
somebody else
truck
from the
employee
county.
can allocate time back to any town work that they're working on. So it doesn't sound like that. Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead,
So-
Councillor Gordon.
As a follow-up to that, it sounds like an increased cost to me, to our town. Even if it's just half of an FTE. So if we had maintained Schruck's operation, we maintained those 3 employees who were doing that work of maintenance of our distribution. We've now given that over to Schruck. We've lost that ability, or we didn't give that over to Schruck, but we lost that capability of the water treatment personnel that were given over to Schruck in the agreement when Schruck then became the operator through the county, or the county became the operator of Schruck, I guess is the way to look at it. So really, at the end of the day, there's an increased cost. However, we don't have that defined number as of yet because we're not sure what the potential will be.
So I can't speak to whether our, the time spent on Turner, I would have to go looking, whether the time spent on Turner Valley Distribution System was separated out from the wages and the time spent from those operation staff working on Schruck. But I could get back, to that with an answer.
Thank you.
Pardon me, Councillor Wright? Are you good? Alright, okay. And Councillor Rob, just so I'm clear, you sitting on West End, cause I'm reading through the sewage collection portion, and rather than meat grind, you've already vetted it, and in your opinion, you are very comfortable with the looks of it in terms of how they're gonna, and I'm referring to 7 point C. The county will ensure one or more of its operating staff will attend meetings of the West End Regional Sewage Services Commission as needed to report on the operations of the town sewage collection system. So they're gonna have an involvement, and you're comfortable with all that?
I said I'm comfortable with the explanation. This still didn't sit right with me, but I think I understand it. And I know that governance is something that West End's working on right now, but this is, you know, with the exception of that part B, there's adding chemicals and stuff like that, cause I thought that was added from West End, no? They physically, somebody on this side physically does it? Thanks, John.
Yeah, the only
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
What
Yeah,
else?
the only chemicals at West End that we're adding at the lift station, and that's to cut down the H2S, which is in the line between the lift station and the sewage plant.
It's not
in
at the
that
lift
line.
station then?
Where
Doesn't it
they're
chem-
adding
doesn't-
chemicals is not in the lift station, it's in the other lift stations, that are around the town as part of the distribution system. But the main lift station in Turner Valley, which is down by the gas plant, that's completely handled by West End. And the chemicals that are entered in there
Yes.
are the ones for the H2S in the
Yes.
line between there through the golf course and on to the sewage plant. And the fact that one of their people can come to our meetings is just the same as what happens in Schruck. Because when there's a technical problem in Schruck that the board needs to discuss, they often brought Dennis in or somebody else to talk to us about it.
Okay, that's making more sense.
But
Go ahead, Gary.
But do I understand that the last lift station, just by the gas plant, that's where we had our bauxite, correct?
Yes.
And that is done by the operators, not by us?
No, that's done by West End.
Yeah, that's the West End operators I'm talking about.
Yeah,
The West End operators.
not the Shook.
No, no.
West End.
So I mean, so when I see in part 2 here, where it says the county shall provide all required chemicals, monitor flushing, maintenance work, if and when needed to control sewage, H2S gas, that's already done by Schruck, pardon me, but that's already done by West End. It's the West End operator, that's not the Foothills operator. Am I still wrong on that?
Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna go. where?
You've got to take yourself a way into two parts. There's the distribution system that's within the town.
I understand.
That's what they're looking after. In that distribution system, there are lift stations.
Right.
Which they maintain. They use chemicals
Understand.
to help with
Understood.
everything else. They're not doing anything at all to put chemicals into the line
Right.
from the main lift station onwards. That's all the bioxide that we're buying through West End.
7B finishing statement says, any sewage facilities owned and controlled by WRSSC are not included in this agreement. So there you go. There you go.
Is that owned, is that owned by West End?
The main lift station by the gas plant is owned by West End.
Okay. But you know, that's still a little cloudy for me, cause I don't think they really add any chemicals until that last lift station, but, so. You can, that's what I say, you'll tidy it up. Right,
Okay.
if necessary.
Mr. Sure, yeah.
So I guess just the last comment on that is,
Yeah.
it's,
Right.
as Councillor Waring has said, it's for our distribution system, you understand that, Councillor?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
It's any, there may or may not be any chemical required, but it's if and when for the flushing, maintenance, repair, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a general statement about what may have to happen on our infrastructure.
So as I said earlier, the explanation is fine.
Well, he's got to go down the hole. Go ahead, Councillor.
No, I'm, this is not because I'm a new person, this is more of a legal question. With some of the governance, questions that are going on right now at some of our other organizations, what's the flexibility, how would something like this get changed or amended, during the term? I mean, it's a 10-year term on this, right? If suddenly something changes in our governance structures and this needs to change, would we, there's no termination provision in here? So I'm just trying to understand how that would be handled if something were to happen.
Go ahead.
Well, specifically to whether West End is gonna be operated by Schruck or not, it's way too early to determine that. The draft of this agreement had begun long before any sort of future West End governance had been contemplated.
Yep.
So, without skimming through for the legalities behind it, I guess I would have to get back to you on that one. Your question is if we didn't like the service, or West End changed governance models, or specifically what is your question around
How do we
the
get,
exit policy?
how do we get out? Cause I didn't see, there's only one, searching the PDF, there's only one mention of termination, and it says, it talks about the terms that survive the termination of the agreement, but then I didn't see anything that actually spoke to the termination of the agreement. So I'd like to get some comfort around that, just how an unwind or how amendment procedures would happen under the agreement. And it may be that, you know, you just reopen it and have that discussion, but I'd like to know explicitly.
The 16 deals with your renewal or extension, but there's no stat conditions about termination.
So,
I noticed that too.
my question for council would be, unless there's a default to the agreement, unless they default in some way or there's a violation of the agreement, why would we as a municipality wanna get out of the agreement?
Well, I would think because it's new waters and we wanna have a bit of a trial period and see how it goes. Obviously, make sure that it's working for everyone.
The counter question to that would be, why wouldn't we wanna have the flexibility to be able to? That would be my point.
More so future councils as well.
A lot of
You
things
have
can
good
happen,
point.
I always like to see a termination provision, or at least have an understanding of what the implications of that termination are.
Totally relevant.
Noted.
Who made the original motion?
Mr. Murray.
14 that refers to termination.
14?
Yeah, 14 IV.
Okay, so look
In
at
the
it.
case of default, then
Now's the time.
if there's default, you can terminate.
If you default, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And if
specifically, like, my specific concern is around West End. If that governance structure changes and if Schruck ends up operating, I mean, right now, everybody's operated under the same parties, but, I mean,
If they take over the government of West End, it's gonna be a completely separate agreement from
Between
Shrupp.
Shruck and West End.
No, it's gonna be an agreement with,
Your microphone?
sorry. I apologise.
Sorry.
In the management of West End, it's not gonna be a simple Shruck will manage West End. It will be more a case of the county will manage West End as the county manages Shruck. And that interrelationship is something we've got to do a lot of work on, because the partners in Shruck are not going to be the same partners that are in West End. So you could enter into an agreement for West End with the county without impacting the agreement of county and Shruck. So you wouldn't be in any position that you would need to terminate this relationship because you entered into another one. It's like we have a relationship with the county and the fire department, say. But that doesn't impact Shruck and it wouldn't impact West End. We've got to keep thinking of them as separate entities.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, with no disrespect, Mr. Councillor Waring, we haven't really decided on governance yet for West End, and it could very well end up the way you're saying. It might end up something different, we don't know.
Nope.
But either way, it doesn't really, I think we're just clouding the problem here. The problem is, Councillor Wilkie makes a good point. What if there's a problem, if we have to get out of it for whatever reason? Is that something that should be in there? I think that's what Councillor Wilkie's asking, and West End's just clouding the problem. It's just, West End's fine, if this is separate. So that's a good question,
And
Mr. Sharp.
there is in 14 termination
Yeah.
by default.
Yeah, 14.5. 14.4, sorry, it's a straight bullet. Terminate this agreement is an actual option.
Well,
Only
only
if-
in a case of
in
default.
In a case of
And
default.
two specific
And
defaults.
default is
Well,
defined.
there's A, B, C, and then 1, 2, 3,
Non-payment and non-performance, there are
Right.
only two.
so.
It's two limiting.
Anyway, it's a good
Well,
point.
Good point. Are you happy with the remedies, or would you like to see more on that? Because we can ask for that, right?
Mhm.
I guess it's a comfort level thing. Personally, my own opinion, because I have the floor right now, I don't foresee any huge problems. They've been operating, if you wanna look at a simple track record, they've been operating since, last October, I wanna say, seamlessly. Old Larry's been doing their thing, they're gonna use the same people. It's not over the moon, type of, scenarios that we're gonna have to deal with. We're looking at our infrastructure from our infrastructure and capital budget side for those things. That's not on them. They're basically the repair if something happens. So, there is the remedies, like we were just mentioning in 14, payment by default and defaulting party interest in performance. Those are specific outs. Suspend performance and its obligations. The right to suspend any payment owing, and then there's also the offsetting of interest payments when the conflict has been notified, so the notice of default is notified. So I'm personally good with this right now. But if you wanna see it, now's the time to make a motion or an amendment to the motion, and we can bring it back, it's not a big deal. Go ahead, Mr. Sharp.
So, I'm happy to take it away, get clarity, and bring it back to you
Sure.
guys on September the 3rd.
That'd be great, right? Specifically, would you like to point out exactly what it is you'd like to see, Mr. Wilkie? Because I think you said it best.
It's just any provision for termination, and importantly to me, because this, to me, is tied with, Shruck, and I know that the agreement is between Shruck and the county and not between the town and the county, but just understanding how their agreement, any agreement termination provisions under their agreement work, because I think the two have to relate very closely here, right? As much as they are amongst separate entities, if they were to not be operating Schrock all of a sudden, that would have implications for this agreement, I think, right? So I'd just like to understand it and understand if there is any concern around, you know, I know everybody wants to lock in their operating staff and have long-term view on what your operating agreement is. And I'm fine with it being some sort of notice provision or something, but I just wanna understand what the thinking is behind not having any provision for termination in here, and happy to hear you come back on that. I just would like to know a little more.
Yeah, perfect. Sure, go ahead.
Read the short agreement, there's
We'll
no
defer.
termination.
So,
There's no termination in the short agreement.
Councillor Waring, could you,
Sorry, I'm having a little aside.
yeah, no, I'm just gonna say, as the maker of the motion, you could, rescind the motion and then, defer.
Yep.
You haven't voted on the motion, so if you'd like to make a friendly amendment to defer
Friendly amendment to defer.
for further information regarding the termination clause.
I do.
Mary, very good. All right, so we're gonna defer to September 3rd. Everyone's in clear understanding? All in favor? Excellent, thank you very much. That was good discussion. Great points, Councillor Wilkie, and very happy with that. Moving on to 14, new business, 14.1, Safety Code Services Quality Management Plan. Mr. Sharp.
Thanks, Mayor Crane, just collecting my thoughts here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, before you is a request to approve an updated quality management plan in place in the Turner Valley. It updates the Safety Code Services Quality Management Plan, which is co-acquired by the province. In the 1990s, we became accredited municipally under the Provincial Safety Codes Act. And in order to stay compliant with the provincial safety codes, we're required to have a quality management plan. The last time we had updated ours was in 2004. And so there's some slight changes in there as per the changes in legislation that I want to bring to council's attention. Quite simply, although there's some changes in layout and wording, the nuts and bolts of the changes to our plan is that the number of inspections required for building, plumbing, and gas permits have been increased as mandated by the Safety Codes Council. So what you'll see in our quality management plan, the frequency of inspections reflects that. From a fire inspection service, we manage that locally, municipally. We have certified safety codes inspectors. And there was an increase in the minimum number of inspections, increase in the minimum number of inspections for building, plumbing, and gas permits necessary. But in order to be in compliance, we needed to increase those inspections during the building construction phase from 2 to 3. There's no debate on that one. And they come at 3 points, timing of at the time of foundation framing and final occupancy stages. Locally, with respect to fire inspections, the code gives the municipality the flexibility to do them as they believe they are needed. And because of the capacity and the size of our town, rather than mandating 1 or 2 or 3 a year, we have followed the minimum requirements in the safety codes. And we've also adopted a complaint and or requirement basis. So rather than telling every business in town that would fall under this, that we'll be there once or twice a year, there are some businesses that just don't require it. Restaurants, for example, childcare centers, they would, and we would dictate that those would happen annually, and you'll see that in safety codes. But there are other small businesses, administrative type businesses, where there's no risk that we would not do as frequently. That reduces the bureaucracy, it reduces the cost to town, and certainly reduces any sort of implications to the business. So we're asking council to adopt those changes to the safety codes, or excuse me, the quality management plan.
Thank you. When I read this, before we get to a motion, when I read this, it appears to me to be more of a preemptive document in terms of new builds versus present occupied dwellings, but you just referenced businesses and annual inspections. I didn't see that.
On the fire side, only on the fire side.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, cause I was thinking, you're talking a lot of money for annual inspections if you're gonna go and check electrical plumbing. Thank you. Okay, in that case, I'm quite fine with that. Councillor Rab, you ready?
I'll make the motion.
Hit your button.
Try. That council adopt a 2019 safety codes services quality management plan as presented.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Wilkie.
Just a quick question, this safety council, safety codes council, I took a quick look at the list, it's basically every municipality in Alberta, it looks like is a member of it, so in order to remain a member in good standing, you have to adopt this, so every other municipality is going to these increased inspection
Correct.
schedules as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Any questions, comments, Lana? Nope, good, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, new business, 14.2, that was, Wilkie made that motion. You got that, Heather?
Yeah.
Or Rab did, sorry. Rab
I did, I
yeah,
got
okay.
that.
Wilkie just keeps talking, so
I
he's
made the
stuck in my
motion.
head.
Sorry, I'm trying to get out of here.
I made the motion and it's carried, so we're ready to move on.
That's right, okay, 14.2, the 2019 organizational meeting, this is a quick one, guys. Go ahead, Mr. Sharp.
Yeah, just a short preamble to this one, just so council understands our intent here. There was a question asked a few minutes ago about how our two new committees of council would play out, and I commented that while we have councillors on the working committee, we now need to formally appoint. Purely coincidentally, our committees will likely be ready to be stood up right around the time that we would have our org meeting, so there's no point appointing councillors and then having that conversation again in a couple of weeks' time. And so staff's recommendation is that we set the organizational meeting now, just because we're having that conversation about council appointments to committees, and that's strictly the only reason that we've inserted it onto this agenda. So as a byproduct of this, and not related to the recommendation, we expect that council will be in a position to appoint their representatives to the two new committees of council at this time, and it'll be a seamless transition. So.
Yep, perfect.
You're recommending November 6th?
No, it's October, isn't it?
No, no.
28.
October 28th.
That was two possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Lana, Councillor Hamilton?
I just wanted to ask for something else that maybe we can discuss at this meeting. It's come up a couple of times in terms of reference, specifically to committee appointment terms, like the length of the term is
Yeah.
something that we seem to be missing when we do our committee appointments, so maybe we can make sure that's very clear for all of the different.
Mm-hmm.
Committees.
So what we'd like to do is standardize that as much as possible, and we expect those types of details to be in the committee's bylaw that's coming forward to you. When we talk about standardizing terms for committees of council.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton, did you just whisper a motion?
Yeah, I sure did. Or do we wanna discuss dates first, or there's two options before us.
Brad was the only stickler.
I'm good at 6th, I'm good. That's what they're recommending.
Okay, option number 2, that council schedule the 2019 annual organizational meeting on Wednesday, November 6th at 6:30 p.m.
Excellent. All in favor?
Sure.
Perfect. I'll actually give them just that little bit of time to cover the terms of reference that we're gonna pick apart,
I will.
right? Okay, excellent, thank you, that's passed, carried, Councillor Hamilton. General correspondence, we have no items. Correspondence action considered, no items. Committee board correspondence. And minutes, West End Regional Services Commission, June 15, 2019. Councillor Rab.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept these minutes as presented for information.
Perfect, thank you. Any discussion, concerns?
Yeah, I'll just make a note of that, it's at this meeting where we talked about not doing any further work on line 1, so that's an abandonment of line 1, so here's the official meetings of which I mentioned last meeting.
Right, perfect. And just for the public who didn't know, the main line that we use in Turner Valley is now officially offline, no more. Okay, perfect, all in favor?
The old line, the
That's
old
what's,
line.
that's what's on the old line.
No, it isn't, is that the main line?
Oh, the main line, the old line. The main old line. 17.2, moving on. Municipal Planning Commission, MPC, Representatives Deputy Mayor Holladay, Councillor Hampton, and Councillor Wilkie, June 19th and the June 15th
May.
meeting
May
minutes.
15th.
May, sorry, what did I say?
June.
June, okay. Councillor Hampton or Wilkie?
They've heard enough of me if you'd like.
It's true.
If you've
we've
got
heard a lot
anything
from
to
him.
say, Lana.
What's that, sorry?
I said they've heard enough of me. If you've got
Oh.
anything to say, Lana.
I don't think there's a lot to report from MPC. Our last meeting was pretty quiet. We deferred most of our items to our next meeting, which is coming up this Wednesday, so, yeah, pretty quiet.
Perfect. Motion to adopt. As
Yep.
presented.
Oh, they've got a question?
Oh,
I thought you said motion to.
oh,
I thought that was
No,
the
no,
vote, yeah.
Councillor
No, you're
Hampton makes the
calling the
motion, and all in favor? Excellent, thank you. And resolutions from closed, we have none. No, sorry, I'm leaving the front again. We're done. Adjourned. Thank you. We're gonna move into closed session in 5 minutes, and then we will come
We need
back
a
out.
motion to go.
So we're gonna take a 5-minute adjournment
Motion to adjourn.
by Wilkie. Wilkie gave us that. 5 minutes to,
We don't need.
not adjourn, I mean break, recess, is what I was trying to say.
You're good, so that you will have